I haven't gotten to use the bell in a long time, but it's nice to hear all that lively conversation of the community. Let us begin our worship this Anzac Day. Te koto te whānau, o Auckland Unitarian. Te koto nā manahiri, no mai, hire mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atua. Te koto, te tato katoa. You might be wondering what the feathers on your order of service have to do with Anzac Day. Good question. All will be made clear in my musings. But for now, all you need to know is that it's called Te Raukura. It is an important symbol to the Maori tribes who affiliate to the Taranaki region. The people of Parihaka witnessed an albatross landing on one of their courtyards, dropping a single feather before departing. For me, it is a symbol of passive resistance to those who use Anzac Day as a patriotic attempt, directly or indirectly, to glorify war. It's also a symbol that honors the passive resistance movement that Toho Kakai and Te Whiti o Rangamai orchestrated in Parihaka as a means of re-elevating the mana of the Maori people. Today's worship is dedicated to all those who peacefully seek justice through nonviolent resistance. We light the chalice of our living tradition with these words. To face the world's shadows, a chalice of light. To face the world's coldness, a chalice of warmth. To face the world's terrors, a chalice of courage. To face the world's turmoil, a chalice of peace. May its glow fill our spirits, our hearts, and our lives. Please join me in the covenant of our congregation in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is the sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. Let us stand if able to sing Spirit of Life. I now invite Larry, because I think that's all we have, to come forward. or time for all ages. Okay, Larry, the pressure's on. You've got to talk to me today, okay? Okay? So, have you ever heard of Parihaka? That's not unusual. A whole bunch of those people out there have probably never heard of Parihaka, though it's recently gotten a little more coverage, so they might know a little bit. Parihaka is a little village. Have you ever seen Mount Tatarakihi? Mom? No? Not yet. Okay. Well, it's a big, beautiful mountain, 2/3 down the way of the North Island. And its shadow is a village called Parihaka. In 1881, on November 5th, remember, you remember it because Guy Fawkes Day. The Maori people remember it because that's the day government troops came to invade, destroy, and arrest the men of Parihaka. And so, yes, and they gathered a bunch of troops, and they prepared to go in and invade the village, and expecting a big fight. And what they got were children singing and skipping rope, and women sitting, talking with each other, or passing out bread to their visitors. They'd baked 500 loaves the day before of bread. That didn't stop them from destroying the village or arresting its leaders, but no one died that day. And this is just a brief overview. There are some really good children's books about it. One is called Remember, but they aren't on ebook, so I wasn't able to share those with you. But it's worth grandparents and parents looking for those books to tell the story. So this is a trailer of a movie that came out a few years ago called The Children of Parihaka. Actually, its title in Maori was Tatarakihi. Tatarakihi. Can you say that?
Tatarakihi.
Close enough. You know what it means? No, I didn't know. It means the singing cicadas. And that's what they called their children in Parihaka. So this is just kind of a brief intro to the story. Hopefully. Come on.
They kept going until they were all arrested. More and more men taken. following the footsteps of our ancestors. We remember.
Aha te wairua o oku tūpuna. Ka rongo ai te awa. Inside the prison, I hear crying, sobbing.
Te whiti and Tohu said, just as night is the bringer of day, so too is death and struggle the bringer of life. Looking back makes us sad, those days of the past.
The soldiers come. We are waiting. Tatarakihi, the children of Parihaka.
It's not coming soon, it came. But that's the story of Parihaka. Can you say Parihaka? Very good. Oh, I wish I was young. I could pick up language like that. It's an important story in New Zealand. So, moving on from that, do you have any joys or concerns?
Nearly 140 years ago, the peaceful settlement of Parihaka
Yeah, well, that's cool.
was sacked by Crown.
Do you have any joys or concerns? No? Okay. Well, then let us sing the three of you off. I now invite those of you with joys or concerns to come forward, light a candle, introduce yourself, and share your story.
Morena, my name is Shireen. I'm lighting this candle to remember my dad, Patrick Seaton Crisp, who fought in the Second World War, who fought at the Battle of Alamein and the Battle of forgotten. But my father, when he had retired, had awful flashbacks and got very depressed. And I just wanted to acknowledge that so many men who went to war, in those days there was nobody, no talking about it, no counselling. Battle of Casino, that was the one. And I just so felt for my father because there was a sort of a cult of silence around people when they came back from the war. So this is to remember not just my father, but all of those men who fought in the Second World War particularly, but all men and women who died in both wars, and in our New Zealand wars as well, because we tend to forget those. So thank you for reminding us about Parihaka. It was part of the Taranaki campaign.
My name is Max. My son has been living in Cambodia for the last 5 years. He has 2 children and he supports his household of 5. They've had an explosive outbreak of COVID in Cambodia, not unlike what's going on in India. Cambodia is one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. They are now on lockdown, which is so extreme that you cannot leave your house, not even to buy food. The markets are all closed and people shop in the markets. There aren't many supermarkets. People are begging the government for food. Being a corrupt government, the only thing that they spend money on is the secret police, the police and the army. So of course the government is unable to meet the needs of people for food. It's grim. It's really grim. And I worry about him and his children.
Good morning, I'm Jenny. I'd just like to light a candle for my dad. He met my mother before the war, they became engaged. He went away for 4.5 years, came back to New Zealand, and within a month was a married man. Now, how do you marry someone you haven't seen for nearly 5 years? I found that just amazing. But as a child, we heard very little about his side of the war because my great uncle and my uncle both won Victoria Crosses and were heroes and both died. And it wasn't till I was a lot older that I realised the suffering my dad had had. He was never at the front line, he was a driver, whatever that entailed. It was quite a bit later that I took pride in what he'd done. Families are funny things. Thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Anne. A joy and a concern, where shall I start? Perhaps we'll start with the joy. On Thursday this week, thanks very much to Paul sitting over there at the computer and 2 family members, I finally got the garage cleared out and sorted after my shift back in 2017, which will mean I can actually get my replacement second-hand vehicle in. It's a plug-in hybrid, so I'll be able to charge it. So all's going well there, thanks so much to them. On the sadder side, we're here on Anzac Day, a day that I never feel I can even go to a ceremony for because I just don't believe in war. A few years ago, we found out that my grandfather, who died back, I think, about 1969, had actually served at Gallipoli. However, he did not serve as an Anzac. He was a member of the British Army. He never told us about this because, of course, we know that the reason we lost so many people at Gallipoli in terms of the Anzacs was because the British stuffed up terribly. Yes, something he would never talk about. He was actually wounded there. And he put his family, we have Jewish ancestry, on a boat to New Zealand in April 1939 because he could see what was coming there. And thank you, Clay, for going into Parihaka. I hope we will revisit this. November 5th is Parihaka Day, and October 28th is New Zealand War's official day. Now, not a holiday, but an official day.
There's a lot to the story. There's plenty more I could tell them.
Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm lighting a candle for my father, who was in World War II. He didn't want to go to war because he was 28 and he tried to get out of it, but they finally got him in 42, so he was in the army in the Pacific. And my mother, she had a great time in Auckland and entertaining the American troops. She said she had a ball. Lots of American boyfriends. So it was a quite different war for her. And she met my dad after the war. And I'd like this candle too for Jos's father. He was in the Dutch army, which may surprise some. There was a Dutch army for about 3 days, I believe, because the Germans just came over, and then he ended up working for the Germans because, well, slave labour, driving trucks in Holland very bravely. So all our family had something back in the 1940s.
I'll light a candle. My name's Audrey. I'll light a candle for Max and my mother, who passed away 18 years ago on Anzac Day, which some of you know, remember her. Ironic that she passed away on Anzac Day, but anyway. And I'll light this also for my father, because none of you really knew her except for Max and Mark, because he passed away Christmas Eve, 1974, before my mother moved down here. And so you all knew her basically as a single woman, but she was very much part of a partnership, and his name was Jack Moss. And he was a medical doctor, so he was always known as, "Hey Doc, how's it going in town?" But the family knew him as Jack Moss. And you'll see some of the hymn books are in memorial to him. Thank you.
It's interesting to me how things like COVID and the wars sadly unite us. We may not experience them exactly the same, but we are reminded of our common humanity. And I light that candle, this candle, for that connection. I now invite you to stand to sing our Koha hymn, "There is More Love Somewhere." every couple of years on this day, or this Sunday closest to this day, I play this song by Eric Bogle. And it's one of the best anti-war songs I know. So I invite you to remember your loved ones and friends who have suffered because of war. I suppose we could make that our sermon and just stop now, but I'm a preacher, so I got things to say. It was a challenge on this Sunday because of our international congregation and live stream. But for them, today marks Anzac Day, held every 25th of April. Anzac, we all know, but they may not, stands for the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps that was formed to fight the Kaiser in World War I. The date was chosen as it marks Anzac's first engagement with the Ottoman Empire at Gallipoli in Turkey in 1915. It was a bloodbath for both sides. 87,000 Ottoman Turks died. 44,000 men from France and the British Empire died. 8,500 Australians died. And 2,779 New Zealanders died. Remember, we only had a population of 1.1 million then. Those men are all buried far from home. In addition, 5,212 Kiwis returned wounded. The Anzacs went off to war certain they would be home by Christmas, unaware of how witless and mad Winston Churchill's war plan was. While Turkish forces lost many more lives in the battle, nothing was changed by the blood and gore. The Ottomans retained control of the Gallipoli Peninsula. The whole episode brings to mind US presidential candidate George McGovern's observation, "I am fed up to the ears with old men dreaming of wars for young men to die in." Since 1916, both Australia and New Zealand have remembered the scars left on our collective psyches by Gallipoli on Anzac Day. I continue to hope in vain that the ceremonies would not glorify such horrific violence by celebrating how noble were the 7,991 casualties who gave lives and limbs for king and country. I would instead prefer it to be a day of swearing off violence of all kinds, now and in the future. While it is traditional to wear the red poppy on this weekend, to my mind, the poppy for some has become sentimentalized. The horrific It sentimentalizes the horrific without requiring the sacrifice of becoming the change we seek. I have decided Te Raukura, the single white feather, or a plume of three, a gift from the albatross left at the sacred site called Parihaka, would be more fitting. Te Raukura represents spiritual, physical, and communal harmony and unity. It is an acknowledgement of a higher spiritual power which transcends itself upon earth. It is a symbol of faith, hope, and compassion for all humankind and the environment that we live in. It is not just an anti-war symbol. It is a call to action, in particular, passive resistance to violence in all its many forms. I'm a student of the school of nonviolence practiced by Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela. What I did not know before coming to New Zealand was that 15 years before Gandhi's first steps towards passive resistance in South Africa, two Maori leaders, Te Whiti o Rangamai and his brother-in-law, Tohu Kakakai, formed a village in the shadow of Mount Taranaki, a visual doppelganger of Japan's Mount Fuji. The village is Parihaka. It was founded on Te Whiti's belief in passive resistance in response to the brutal land wars. His ideas eventually influenced Gandhi's successful strategy to overthrow British rule of India, King's successful civil rights movement against segregation, and Mandela's dismantling of apartheid. Parihaka's 150-year saga is hard to summarize. The story begins with colonization and European settlers, the Pakihas, demands for land. The Crown had a simple, cunning plan. It was based on the idea that Maori who fought against the Crown for taking their land had thereby forfeited their property rights. Confiscating the land of such rebel natives fulfilled the dual purpose of punishing them and making their land available for settlement. In addition, the sale of the confiscated land to Pakeha settlers provided revenue to the Crown, essentially paying for the war that allowed Pakeha to claim the land in the first place. When Te Whiti and Tohu were forced from their homes, they founded Parihaka on the principle, all fighting must cease. The canoe by which we are to be saved is forbearance. Te Whiti's message of peace, nonviolence, and equality drew Maori from far and wide, swelling the population to 2,000. Up to 1,000 more would come for monthly gatherings to hear Tohu and Te Whiti speak. It became the largest Maori community in the country. For a decade, the settlement flourished, expanding its cultivations on the surrounding land. For a decade, the people weren't opposed. Then in 1878, the slumbering government awoke, prodded into action by settlers clamoring for land. Surveyors began laying out roads and sections, breaking a promise made 6 years earlier by the Crown. For several months, Te Whiti allowed the survey to proceed pending discussion of the situation with the government. But the government showed no inclination to discuss. So in 1879, Te Whiti and Tohu began to resist. They had the surveyors and their tools physically removed from their land. When the surveyors returned, they had their pegs uprooted and chopped to pieces. Then Te Whiti and Tohu played their trump card. They sent out Parihaka men to plow confiscated settler land. It was a genius move on their part in choosing the settlers' tool to make a political protest against settlement. By using contemporary farming implements and not traditional Maori tools for planting, they asserted their right to participate in the modern economy on land taken in contravention of the government's own word. They would also have been keenly unaware of the religious symbolism. Maori were constantly being exhorted by missionaries to turn their swords into plowshares, to abandon their savage ways and embrace peace. The Parihaka prophets, practitioners rather than mere preachers of peace, turned the missionaries' words back on them. Peace is what you taught us. Why then do you come against us with the sword? Each furrow condemned their hypocrisy. Only men of mana, those of good standing and integrity, were sent out to plow. These acts of trespass were not trivial. They required both courage and restraint. As they plowed, the men chanted a song containing the words, "I am cast upon a righteous path, to be the fuel upon the fire." Te Whiti, they claim, will have the final word. The plowmen, if opposed, were not to resist. When asked what should be done in the face of violence, Tohu answered, "Gather up the earth on which the blood is spilled and bring it to Parihaka." The government got the message and responded swiftly. Plowmen were arrested, fined exorbitant sums they had no hope of paying, deported, and imprisoned. Under the cloak of a national emergency, the government suspended the right to trial and passed the first series of draconian acts that became progressively more desperate and unjust as time went by. Native Minister John Sheehan advised armed constabulary officers not to worry about the legality of their arrests, telling them, "You take them in and the government will find the law." Take them they did. More than 400 plowmen were sent to prisons. Troops were sent to destroy the village and arrest Te Whiti and Tohu. If people know anything of the Parihaka story, they know this part. The 2,500 strong community sitting together on Marae through the night of November 4th, 1881, not knowing when the troops would arrive. The 1,500 armed constabulary soldiers and volunteers, weighed down with ammunition, encircling the village, expecting violence, but were greeted instead by singing, skipping children and women who had baked 500 loaves of bread to feed their visitors. And yes, a dog which cocked its leg against the cannon and was later believed to have doused the gunpowder with its urine. To this day, if a dog wanders into a meeting, it is not chased out in deference to that defiant animal. We would know very little about this day, the Day of Plunder, as it's called, were it not for a pair of journalists who defied a news blackout imposed by the Crown on pain of instant arrest. One wrote, "The whole spectacle was saddening in the extreme. It was an industrious, law-abiding, moral, and hospitable community, calmly awaiting the approach of men sent to rob them of everything dear to them." These journalists and papers they worked for were the scant few who dissented from the almost universal vilification of the prophets and what they stood for. One local editor, 11 years later, offered the opinion that all things considered, the Parihaka difficulty might prove to be one of the greatest blessings New Zealand ever experienced. For without doubt, it will be a war of extermination. Justice demands these bloodthirsty fanatics should be returned to the dust. The time has come in our minds when New Zealand must strike for freedom, and this means the death blow to the Maori race. While it would be naive to think pockets of such violent racist attitudes don't still exist, thanks to the people of Parihakas being the change Te Whiti and Tohu envisioned, a peaceful path forward has been forged for reconciliation and reparation. Te Whiti and Tohu's way, as voiced by Gandhi, was the active part of nonviolence is love. The law of love requires consideration for all life. One who follows this law must not be angry even with the perpetrator of the greatest imaginable wrong. Although he must thus love the wrongdoer, he must never submit to his wrong or his injustice. Suffer all the hardships to which the wrongdoer may subject him in punishment for his opposition. Parihaka's practice of nonviolence resulted in the Crown officially apologizing on the 9th of June 2017 for the atrocities committed when it sacked the peaceful Taranaki settlement of Parihaka in 1881. People openly wept as the apology was read out by treaty negotiations minister Chris Finlayson. He apologized for the wrongful arrests and imprisonment of Parihaka men and their leaders, Te Whiti o Rangamai and Tohu Kahi. Mr. Finlayson also apologized for the rape and molestation of the women and girls who were left behind when the men were imprisoned in the South Island. He said it was a shameful part of New Zealand's history, which both Maori and Pakeha found hard talking about for different reasons. May the story of Parihaka become one with who we are. Let us hold up the white feather with love and determined resolve. So be it. During the first Iraq War, I was a minister of a little Episcopal church out in the desert. And every Sunday, we ended the service singing something by Mozart called Dona, Nobis, Pacem. You may know the words, but I've invited Yo-Yo Ma to come and play the tune for you. So he's going to play the tune, and then we're going to sing it, first in unison, then the women get their moment, the men get theirs, and then we end by singing in unison one more time. So let's see if I can pull this off. Oh, let's. There may be an ad. Yeah, there's an ad. Hold on. got that tune? The lyrics are kind of complicated. If your Latin's a little rusty, it means give or grant us peace. So let's give it a try. Please stand. Nice first try. You're going to get another chance. Join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, or the community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together. It's time for notices, and I'll let you pass off to one another. I have to go tell the Zoom congregation I'm running late. Who's going?
Kia ora koutou, my name's Rachel. I'm just standing up here on behalf of Mark Swift, the Swift, who's not here this morning, but I did send around the sheet of paper for people to volunteer for various things, and I don't know where it's up to, but please, if you haven't had a chance, if you haven't seen it, put your name down for something for the next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Apparently it's at the back, the sheet. I've got another one. Yeah, there mine. This one is for the quiz night on Saturday evening, the 22nd of May. So you don't feel you're committed once you sign this, but we just want to make sure we get round tables and teams going, and I want to make sure we have enough tables. So I hope we'll see you all on Saturday evening, the 22nd. So I'll pass it to Max first.
Yes, this is an announcement on behalf of the Peace and Social Justice Committee. The Glen Taylor School Help a Kid to Camp sponsorship campaign is here again with the years 7 and 8 students going to Camp Betson on Kawa Island at the end of May. And these students do need our help. Glen Taylor School is a Decile 1 school located in Glendowie, and the church has developed a good relationship with them through our sponsorship of Duffy Books and Homes. And sponsored students will write to you to introduce themselves, explain what they aim to get out of the camp, and afterwards they'll give a full rundown of their experience. So if you'd like to sponsor one or more students to camp, it's $70 per student. Please make a sponsorship donation to the church, referencing the donation as Kids Camp, and then we'll pass those details on to Glen Taylor School. Donations need to be made before the 7th of May. And then if you make the sponsorship through the church, then of course you can get the tax benefits. But remember, donations close on May 7th. So information's available on the notice board on the top there, about 2/3 of the way along, and I've left sponsorship forms on the chair there. It's handy to fill that in, but if you don't, we can certainly marry up your donation that comes to church with the details to pass on to Glen Taylor School. Thanks a lot. Oh, sorry.
What are we doing today, Larry? Do you want to tell everybody? Oh, do you want to show everybody? We're making some poppies for Anzac Day. We've been making some poppies for Anzac Day. You can see some people in the audience have also got their poppies on, so that's nice. Yeah. And we've been talking a little bit about Anzac Day and what it means. Do you want to share anything with everybody, Larry? Okay. I'll hand back to you then.
Thank you for not rescheduling the service for dawn.
Just anybody who is interested in being part of the singing group, we're just going to have a short get-together after everyone's had a cup of tea. So probably around about 11:45 or so. So quite a few are not here. That's cool. We've got enough just to have a bit of a discussion and where we're going to be sort of heading on our prep.
Where should we meet?
I think probably this little room will be all right. Would that be okay?
Please hurry.
Do you want to help me with this, Viv? The Craftivist group are making badges in support of the Tree Council. We need to make 120 badges, and it's to ask the government, so there's one badge for every MP, and we're asking the government to protect trees as they review the RMA. That's right? Yep. So the Tree Council are doing the policy and the letter, and we're making the gifts.
Yep. Just quickly, I'm on the board of the Tree Council, and we're a lobby group, and we want to change the law, which National removed all protection of trees from private land in 2012, and we want to put something back into the RMA.
So if you'd like to make a badge, luckily we have a potter amongst us who's making lots. But if you'd like to make one, I have some little kits with me, so please see me afterwards. Tess, do you want to?
Sounds like an act of passive resistance to me. I have kind of an unusual closing words for today. It's a song, Parihaka, by Herbs. I want to say Herbs. You all say Herbs. With Tim Finn. It tells the story beautifully. I now invite you to listen to John Lennon, Imagine, and then afterwards, I know it's later than usual, but I hope you'll stay and join in small groups to discuss the conversation starter.